She is an engineer with Facebook, currently Facebook. She's been there for 3 years. Prior to that, she's worked for other companies, including startups. She's been at Message One, she's been at VMware, and currently she's the director at Facebook, and today's talk is going to be on Facebook goes mobile. So please join me in welcoming Jocelyn Goldfein.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about Facebook and how we've kind of pivoted to mobile. I don't know if you've heard the story, but we really started out as web-based software, and when mobile came along for a long time, we were actually kind of sucking at it. And we worked really hard, and we got better, and we will get better yet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons we learned along the way, and some of the changes we made, and I hope also to give you something that I never got in high school, which is a little window into what exactly is it that software engineers do. What is our work? Because I didn't really, when I was in high school, like the only kind of mental images I had of software engineers was like occasionally they'd show up in a movie as like that weird guy in the basement breaking into the CIA's computers and starting World War III. Possibly the 80s. But I didn't have much of an idea of what they did. So hopefully this will give you at least an inkling. Let me start by getting a feel from my audience. All of you are high school students here, obviously, right? How many of you have an iPhone? An iPhone? How about Android? Show some Google love. A couple, okay. Oh, you guys are really close to Mountain View. Some of your parents probably work at Google. Okay, how many of you don't have either, just a plain old dumb phone? A few of you, okay. It's fine. They get there. They're getting cheaper and cheaper. How many of you own a laptop? Obviously. A laptop? Laptop, computer. Computer your own. A tablet? Tablet's getting more popular, okay. How many of you, all of you are over 13, right? How many of you have a Facebook account? How about Instagram? Give me Instagram. It's growing. We've got 1 billion, they've got 150 million. They're catching up. They're coming up strong. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that Facebook has learned on mobile. So first of all, let me give you some context on why mobile matters, all right, as a technology and why it's really changing the shape of the technology industry. For one thing, mobile is just big. It's come on faster than almost any technology disruption. You guys take it for granted it's been there all your life, but it's actually come faster than the internet, faster than the computer. Original fixed line telephones, the first phone calls, the proofs of concept were made in 1876. It took about 85 years for landlines to reach 100 million users. Cell phones, meanwhile, the first commercial cell phone services were offered about a century later in the 1970s. 34 years, 6 billion, all right? So I know those are huge numbers, they're hard to visualize, but like, there are more than 6 times as many cell phones as there are total phones, total landlines in the world. It's big. Next, it's personal. It's your own device. A landline might serve a business, a region, a family. Your cell phone is your own. When someone calls that number, they're calling you. And we use it under personal circumstances. How many of you use your cell phone in bed? I do. All right, who will cop to this one? All right, I'm not gonna ask for a show of hands on this next one, but 40% of people will admit. Okay. All right, so these devices are us. They represent our identity in a way that our laptop, our tablet does not. And what do we use these devices for? We use them for things that represent who we are, connecting with other people, phone calls, texting, and yes, social networking. Lastly, these are really powerful devices. It's not just a telephone. It's not just an email or texting device. It's not just a game console or a GPS navigator. It is a computer that gives you access to hundreds of thousands of applications and services. And it has more than 100,000 times as much computing power as the computers that landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon. And so in essence, you guys are all walking around with a supercomputer in your pocket. And innovative people like me and my coworkers can do some exciting things with all that compute power. So you may be wondering, when am I going to talk about Facebook? The time is now. But actually, Facebook and mobile are incredibly closely tied. We have over 1 billion users, and most of them access Facebook on mobile. And Instagram growing fast too. And when you add up the amount of time people spend on their mobile devices, that sort of hours a month when you're interacting with your smartphone, it turns out that more than 20% of the time that you're spending or that people are spending is time spent on Facebook and Instagram. And literally Facebook and Instagram, not any other social networking services, just us. And you add the rest of it in, it's more. So this device is a social networking device. And by the way, with stats like that, I fully expect some of you have already been on Facebook while I'm talking, and many more of you will be by the end of the talk. It's fine with me. Oh my God. All right, but it wasn't always this way. Facebook was not always the dominant force on mobile. In fact, it was not very long ago, you might remember seeing some of these headlines that like Facebook's a total loser and that mobile is actually the wave that's going to kill us. That our apps are bad, they're slow, that we have no way to monetize it, and that people will shift away to other apps. And you know, we never believed that, actually. I think a good thing about Facebook is there's always a lot of press about Facebook because so many people use our software, and I think inside we keep a pretty level head. And one of the things our Chief Operating Officer, Sheryl Sandberg, says is, you know, we're never as good as they say we are, and we're also never as bad as they say we are. So that helps keep a level head. But nonetheless, we knew inside Facebook that we were not yet shipping very good apps on mobile, that it was our destiny to be great on mobile, and that we had to change Facebook and the way we build it to become great. So what did we do? I'm giving you a cut down version of this talk because I want to make time to take a lot of questions. But I'll talk about 2 or 3 sort of big changes we've made that are really important. So part of Facebook's ethos of making software is to go fast. And you guys, bless you, have never lived in a world where you had to use software that looked like the left side of the screen. Maybe in a museum. All right, but the web really changed software for the better. In the bad old days of desktop software, making software was like posting a flyer, right? Like you'd write it, you'd try to get it perfect, you'd burn it to a CD, you'd ship it out to the world, and then you'd have no idea what was going on. Like you might sell it, in which case you'd know how many people bought it. But you would not have any real way of knowing if it was successful or unsuccessful because of what you did or in spite of what you did. And you had no idea which features people liked better or worse. If there were bugs, it was really laborious to sort of figure out what was wrong and how to fix them because you couldn't have exactly the same environment that your software was running in. If you shipped an update to your software, you really had, you know, all you could do is sort of pray that people would install it, but you had no control. And the web changed everything for the better because now the software is running on our servers, and instead of like, you know, tacking a flyer on a wall somewhere and hoping that people see it, all of a sudden it's more like a conversation. Like the software is running on our servers, so we can see who's using our software. We can see how many people are using it, how much time they're spending. We can see what features they like. We can cut the features they don't like. If we see that we're not getting data in a certain area we expect, we can figure out there might be a bug. Bugs are easy to find because the software is running on our own servers. And we can update it in real time to respond to what users are doing. Facebook, we actually update the software running on our web servers twice a day. Every morning, every evening, we update the software running on those servers, add more features, fix more bugs, make it faster. And so it's like a real-time, real-life conversation with our users. Mobile is kind of in between. Mobile runs on your device, not on ours. It connects back to us all the time, so we can tell how many people are using it and how much time they're spending. But we can't update it all the time. We probably already update it more often than you'd like. And so we had a lot of trouble. And it's also, when you only get to update your software every so often, you can get into this kind of game of chicken, where the photos team is trying to get a new photo uploader in, and the newsfeed team is trying to improve scrolling performance, and the messaging team wants to implement this really cool chat heads feature, which puts your friend's face in a bubble. And everybody's not exactly done at the same time, and you get people sort of running into each other at the end game of who gets to ship and who gets to hold things up and who's delayed because they're waiting for someone else. Well, We solved that, and what we do on mobile is we run what we call a train release. And the model of a train release is we ship the software for iPhone and Android at the same time every 4 weeks, every Thursday, every fourth Thursday. And if a feature is done and ready to go, it goes in that release. It's like the train leaves the station. If you have a ticket and you're on the train, you go. And if you miss the train, you miss the train, you catch the next one. And the next one is only 4 weeks away. So 4 weeks actually sounds like an eternity to software developers at Facebook. But it's a lot better than not knowing when your software is going to ship. So getting on the train model was really important to us. And getting sort of interactive with our users, being able to respond in real time to what our users were doing, that's something we're still working on. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second. Another problem that we had in the desktop world and not in the web world is in the desktop world, you ship software into void, and then it ran on like crazy on people's own hardware, and you could never anticipate the environment in which your software would be running. If you give the web, software is all running on your own servers, they're all exactly the same. If it works on this server, it's going to work on the other 50,000 servers. You know, mobile devices, especially Android, there are only a couple variations on the iPhone, a couple combinations of operating system and hardware. But on Android, we're kind of back in this world of incredible diversity. And you can run into problems like this one. So we noticed that we were getting a spike in user complaints or logs of a crash during photo uploads. And this particular crash had a unique signature, and it was coming mostly from a few regions in Asia. And we didn't know what to make of that. There's nothing region-specific about our photo uploading code. And we started digging in, and we found what we were able to do was trace that crash to about 10 specific Android phones. And then we noticed the smoking gun. All 10 of those phones used exactly the same Intel CPU, Intel processor, that's actually computing and running the software. And we realized that there was a bug, there was an interaction between our photo uploading code, specifically the code that kind of compresses the photo and makes it small enough to upload, and that CPU that was hitting just 2 phones out of the millions of devices that we support. So we were able to quickly ship a fix for the bug. We actually, luckily, it turned out for that feature, we had the ability on the server side to say, don't use this code, that we could target at those phones. And so for a while, those users just had slow uploads instead of crashing uploads. And then in the next train release, we shipped the fix, and everybody's happy. So the moral of the story, some of the good things that Facebook does, one is really good monitoring of what's going on the server side. The fact that we collected our photo crash logs, the fact that we can notice the correlation between crashes and region and trace that back to a device and a CPU, helped us zero in on exactly what was wrong. Otherwise, you could stare at that code for a month and not see a bug. A second thing that was good was that we had a lot of server-side control. So when we noticed that users were having a problem, we could do something about it from HQ without having to ship new software to them. And then the regular train model also helped us get fixed to them very soon. And last but not least, like, how do you avoid shipping bugs like that? How do you, as a software company, make your software perfect when it first hits users' hands? It's prohibitively difficult to test every feature of your software on every combination of operating system and hardware. And so we don't try. Instead, what we did was launch a beta program on Android. And if you're one of the lucky Android users in the room, you can sign up to be a Facebook beta tester if you like. And about 1 million people have signed up, and they represent every combination of phone and operating system that we support. And so we're usually able to tell from the sort of 3 or 4 week soaking period in that beta program if we've introduced a problem that might affect even a small number of users. So that beta program is something we never really needed or used on the web, but is a total lifesaver on mobile. And it's a way that our users can help us make better software, which I also think is pretty cool. All right, so I talked about data, and obviously our ability to sort of monitor these logs and notice that there was like a discrepancy about uploads, that was pretty valuable for finding a problem. We also use data in a different way. We use it to design features. So let me talk about a feature that we built last summer. So on the left here is the way that, you guys are iPhone users, so you all have this. On the left is the way that navigation used to work on Facebook. You used to tap on those 3 horizontal bars. Inside Facebook, we call that the hamburger menu. We invented it, and it's been copied a lot of places, and now people kind of universally recognize it as the sign for menu, the little hamburger. But we decided this thing was kind of a laundry list. It was sort of hard to figure out what were the main things, and you sort of could scroll forever and see more and more things. And we wanted to make a clearer and more streamlined navigation model. And so we built this, this tab bar, which you have now, which has just a tab for feed and messages and notifications, and sort of all this extra junk goes into the more tab. So, okay, so far so good. We built a design, we thought hard about it, we studied users, we made pretty mocks, we built it all, and we said, great, we're done. We're ready to ship, except maybe we should test it. So we also, at the same time, built a system that let us ship both UIs to our users, the left and the right. And we just turned on the right-hand side, the new design, to like 1%, 5% of our users. And we watched what they did with it. So sort of continuing this idea of software as conversation with our users. And what we found was, it was pretty good. Users used the tabs. When we went and sort of met 8 users who had it and talked to them, they said they liked it. But what we noticed was the users in the test, those 1% of users, they were spending less time on Facebook. And they were particularly spending less time in Newsfeed, and they were liking and commenting on fewer stories, which meant that their friends were getting fewer likes and comments, which is kind of like blood of Facebook. It's sort of what you're all there for. And so this was like clearly not a good change at all. It meant that users were not seeing stories that they would have cared about. And so we went back and tried to understand what was going on. And what was going on was that if you would sort of tab away from Newsfeed into one of these other tabs, like your messages or your notifications, there would be no signal to you that new stories came in as you were sitting on Facebook. Nothing would kind of flash and say, hey, there's more Newsfeed stories, come back. And because navigation can kind of naturally drag you back through Newsfeed, users would just sort of finish clearing through their notifications and then stop. And so what we wanted to do was signal users that there's more fresh content for them, that their friends have posted something new that they might like to see. And so we unleashed this testing framework, and we built actually like 50 variations of tests to try to figure out what to do to fix this problem. And I'm going to show you just 3 of them, which are only very subtly different. If you have already spotted the differences, good on you. So this is the original design on the left, which is just here's the plain tab bar, no sort of differentiation. Now, the normal thing Facebook does when it wants you to go look at something is we pop up this little red badge that says, hey, there's messages waiting for you, or notifications. So if 9 news stories came in on feed, we would put up a little badge that says 9 plus comes up on the news feed tab. And that worked really well. When users saw that red bubble, gosh darn it, they tapped. That was a strong signal to them. But we were uneasy. I mean, it recovered all the time, and then some. But we were uneasy with that design because sort of throughout the history of Facebook, when a red bubble comes up, it's something that demands your attention. It is a message to you. It's someone mentioning you or responding to you or commenting on your post. We haven't ever actually used the notification number for just newsfeed stories that are kind of passively scrolling in. I think the sort of understood, what our users understand is that like it's sort of best effort if they see newsfeed stories or not. So even though this worked to recover the numbers, we didn't think it was the best design, and we thought it actually kind of violated user trust in a way, because it implies that there's something demanding their attention. And so we went with something, I don't know if you can even see it from the audience, but it's just like this is what we actually shipped, so you may have seen it on your phone. You may not have ever noticed seeing it on your phone, but trust me, it's working on you. Which is just a little very subtle blue glow at the bottom of the tab, which just kind of subliminally triggers you to be, there's something happening over there. I'm going to tap that and see what's going on. And then it brings you back to the top of your feed and you see the stories. So this worked fine. This recovered the time and restored us to original levels. And so I think the interesting takeaway here is, first of all, no matter how good a designer you are, we had brilliant designers working on this design, and we had great engineers building it. But no matter how good you are, without data, without understanding your user, you won't know if you've built something great or catastrophic. And so testing it is critical. But I guess the other thing is, as important as it is to have data, you can't let the data decide. You can't let the data do the designing for you. Your designers have to be informed by the data, but not led by it. And so even though this maybe had the maximum metrics, this was the thing that was right for users, and we knew it, and we shipped it. And so I think one thing that's maybe interesting about this story is that these days the software we build is for people. And so to be a software engineer, you kind of have to be a designer too. Because when we build technology for people to use, if we put the user at the center, if we think of people when we're deciding what to build, then the technology becomes personal, and then the software is better too. And I think that like sort of marrying the understanding of the technology with an understanding of people is what actually makes someone a really great software engineer, or at least a really great software engineer of user-facing. All right, next challenge. So mobile's obviously a huge opportunity. It reaches a ton of people. But simultaneously, one of the biggest opportunities and biggest challenges of mobile is its ubiquity, and especially the fact that mobile is how the rest of the world is coming online. Facebook already has over 1 billion users. There are only about 2 billion people on the planet with internet connectivity, with broadband. Like, we're getting pretty saturated. But there are another 5 billion people in the world who do not have internet access at all. What we take as sort of a God-given right, what we can't imagine life without, they do not have. And mobile is how those people are going to get internet access. They're not going to get it from a laptop and a cable connection. They're going to get it from a mobile device and from data. And Facebook has created an industry consortium called Internet.org. We partnered with Sony and Ericsson and all the handset manufacturers and much of the carriers. Like, we've created this consortium whose goal in life, whose purpose of existence, is to bring the internet, to bring data, and to bring phones to the next 5 billion people on the planet Earth. Because our fundamental mission at Facebook is to connect the world, and you can't do that with only rich people. You've got to do that with everyone. And so there are 3 big barriers that Internet.org is trying to bring down. The affordability of the phone, the efficiency of the services we're providing, and creating new business models for people to serve those users so that this is sort of cost-effective and reaches them all. And Facebook itself and the way we develop our apps can play a large part in that. If you think about the amount of internet traffic, like if 20% of the time people are spending on their phones is actually spent on Facebook, imagine the percentage of the carrier's data networks that is actually consumed with Facebook photos alone. It's a staggering number. I'm not going to say what it is. And so how do we, walking around carrying our HTC Ones or our iPhone 5Ss like in our pockets with our 4G data connections and on Wi-Fi half the time, how do we have empathy? How do we build software? How do we, if I said putting the user at the center is how you make great software, how do you do that when you are living this like really privileged existence that is so different from the experience of the actual users of your software? And indeed, what you will find, or if you have ever visited India or South America and used local phones and local networks, is that the experience of using Facebook on a low-end gingerbread phone of the type that you can easily buy at a store like this in Bombay is, it's pretty bad. It's actually really awful. It's actually like you tap the icon and wait for Facebook to start and then you wait. It's like taking the 5-minute cab ride to get to Facebook. And it's just, and so how do we as software engineers build for this entirely different audience than this entirely different experience than what we build? And so empathy is actually a huge part of it. There's no substitute for that. And so we actually took our engineers and product managers and we sent them on trips. We sent them to Africa, we sent them to India, we sent them to South America. And we also built labs in our headquarters which simulate the device and network conditions. So those engineers carry those phones. You can plug into the lab and see what scrolling your newsfeed is like if you're using a network connection that simulates conditions in Africa. And so in so doing, what we find is that we can kind of unlock our own ingenuity, our own capacity to invent solutions to problems that just seemed harder that we weren't even focused on before. And because we're in this position that so much of the traffic and so much of the activity on the phones is coming from Facebook, that even a comparatively small change, which was easy, one of our software engineers did it in less than a month, we adopted a new image standard for the Facebook photos called WebKey, which essentially delivers the same high quality of photo, but delivers a sort of 20% reduction in the image size. Like one small change like that, we can save our users cumulatively billions of dollars in data consumption costs. Like we can save money for our users that they're spending on their data plans, in phenomenal amounts. So we can change the world. It's this very satisfying feeling that you can make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's ultimately what drives us, is this idea that we're nowhere close to done. That as much success as Facebook has, as many people are on and using Facebook, we are just still barely started on changing the world, on connecting the world, and making a difference. So this is one of my favorites. Look, Facebook's a little slogan happy. If you ever have the chance to visit and tours around Facebook campus, you will see lots of posters on the wall. This is one of my favorites. I truly feel this journey is 1% finished. And I think that that's maybe never more appropriate than when talking to you guys, because your own journey is barely begun. And you have so many possibilities in front of you. And you can go anywhere from here. So I'd love to stop the prepared talk here and just take some questions and see if I can shed a little light on what might be possibilities down the path for you guys. And I think somebody's going to run a mic around, but I can also repeat questions. All right, let me start taking questions. Right here in the face. Yeah, you. Good put up. Why are the notifications at the bottom instead of the top? You mean in the redesigned tab bar? Because there used to be on top. We tried it both ways. We thought it was crowded on top. It probably will be on top on Android, because on Android you have like a bar of buttons, like physical buttons on the phone. So we'll probably put them on the top there. But we usually we play with it, right? We try both designs. We try thousands of mocks, and we just see which ones look good. A lot of times you have a really good idea, and you build it, and then it's like, you know the saying, a picture speaks 1,000 words? Like, it's so true, because you can argue with someone for days about whether the button should be at the top or the bottom, or you can just build it and use it and realize, oh yeah, it's better at the bottom. Argument over. So I think that's actually one of the things I really enjoy about being a software engineer, actually, is like the power to end arguments, because you just build it, you see? I actually love to argue too. How many of you were on the speech and debate team? Anybody? I was captain of my high school speech and debate team. It's actually probably one of the most useful career things I did in high school, little did I know.
You guys, if you're going to ask a question, will you stand up, like when she points at you so we can all hear it, and use that like outside voice? You can do it. I have faith.
I'll repeat the questions too. You're in the red. Are there any cool new mobile features that are coming out? Well, if I told you, then that would be telling. If you enroll in the Android beta program, you can get a few weeks preview. How about that? I already took a question from you, so I will let you first unless nobody else has questions. In the one. Yep. Yes. Would it ever be practical to make multiple apps, like a complex one for people with first world phones and a really simple one for people in emerging markets? Yes, absolutely. In fact, we do a lot of that. So for those of you without smartphones, there's still a Facebook app for your phone. It's called Facebook for Everyone. It's based on a company we bought called Snap2. And you can also use Facebook from the web browser on that phone. So even feature phones can access Facebook. And we also have pursued, it worries us too, the amount of complexity in our app. And if you want that app to be really fast, if you want it to start in just a couple seconds, which is something I put a lot of time and energy into, there is kind of like a time-space trade-off where the more features you cram in, the less lean and simple your application is. So we think a lot about making standalone apps for certain kinds of functionality, like we have a separate app for messaging now. We had a separate app for photos, which we decided didn't make sense on its own. And we do debate a lot, whether our main Android app is ever going to be good enough for those low-end phones, because the kind of, I said the next 5 billion people are coming online. They're coming online with phones. Bad news for all you Apple fanboys. The phones they're going to come online with are Android phones. Android is going to power the emerging world. But the version of Android they're going to come online with is like a 3 or 4-year-old version of Android, which is a very strange inversion in software history. Usually as a software engineer, you can kind of count on as the hardware's going to get better and better under you. And we're not going to live in a world where for the next few years, the hardware is going to increasingly get worse and worse and worse on us, because more and more new users are going to be appearing from nowhere or coming onto the hardware for the very first time with a very low-end device. So we have thought very hard about, hey, screw it, maybe we should just have a separate team working on a separate low-end version of the app just for those phones, so the rest of us can kind of be unleashed. The thing is, so far, every single thing we've come up with that we would want to do for those phones, like consume less data, or launch faster, or use up less memory, or crash less, those are all things we would kind of want for our first world users too. It's just not bad for them. And we haven't run out of improvements to make. So I think if we get to the point where we hit a wall and we just can't improve anymore without cutting out functionality, then yeah, we would seriously consider the effort of making a wholly separate version of the app. for low-end phones, or truly the typical phone, honestly, so you guys could have high-end phones. So we would consider that, but we haven't run out of improvements to make yet, so there's still lots to cover. But very good question, something hotly debated at Facebook. Yes?
So I encountered a app that was like photo Facebook, or like a photo app, and I like downloaded it, but I didn't use it, so I was gonna ask you like, what is that again from that?
You downloaded the Facebook Camera, which is a Facebook separate standalone photos app, which is actually an app that I worked on, and we've recently retired it. So the idea of Facebook Camera is like this device in your pocket is also your camera. It's not just your phone. It's not just your Facebook access device. And obviously a lot of what people want to do on Facebook is share photos, but we thought that, hey, a lot of the time maybe it's like, it's slow, like you launch Facebook, it blows your whole newsfeed, like it's not the thing that occurs to you when you're like sitting there in that Kodak moment and you just want to grab a shot, right? And so we thought, hey, maybe we'll make a really streamlined camera application that is just about like with one click, you're taking a photo, but that application is really optimized for sharing that photo on Facebook because 90% of the time you take a photo on your phone, what you may want to do with it is share it to Facebook. For a lot of people, that's true. And so that was the idea, was just to give people a really quick entry into like, oh, photogenic moment, quick, like tap the camera button, not the Facebook button, but capture those photos. And then in that moment that you capture them, you're also able to tag them with Facebook tags and location and the other things that you may want to do to make it directly a Facebook story, as opposed to like waiting hours and then coming back and posting it to Facebook later. So capturing the moment in real time was the idea. And why did it take off? I don't know. We might not have made the app well enough. It may have been that the space was too crowded with other camera apps. I think that a lot of people didn't just want to share their photos on Facebook, and so they didn't want a specialized Facebook application. But I think a lot of people were also just really comfortable doing the photo sharing in the Facebook app, and so it was just a little bit redundant. And we decided, I mean, it was good. It was not bad. It had millions of users. By any startup's definition of success, it would have been like a wild runaway success. But we decided that it was not worth the effort, frankly, because the whole photos team is only like maybe 5 mobile engineers. So it was actually a pretty big effort for them to maintain a separate app. So we decided it was not worth it. Here in the front row in the stripes. What's the hardest part of being a software engineer? I don't know. It's pretty fun. Like sometimes the problems are hard to solve, but I always enjoyed like, I don't know, I like logic puzzles and Sudoku and crossword puzzles and things like that. So I think like the technically challenging part is actually often the fun part. I would say it's probably the hardest part about any job, which is what to do when you disagree with other people. Because software is fundamentally a team sport. If you look, there's no software of any significance that's ever been built by a person working all on their own. And so if you want to build something like Facebook or even a small app like the Facebook camera app that 4 or 5 people to build, and that was actually resting on top of a gigantic service that's been built by other people. So like what to do when you disagree with teammates, right? Like all your software has to connect and hook up, so you have to agree about like the interfaces and how your software is going to work together. But you also have to kind of agree about what you want the software to do, right? Like we could have argued for days about whether the tab bar was on top or on bottom. We probably did. And so, you know, I think that's probably the hardest thing. But I probably, you know, probably what's hard is different for every person. Here in the 8 sweatshirt.
It's 2 questions. The first question is, why did Facebook buy Instagram? And then my second question was, as far as Facebook's success, was the company in general disappointed with its initial public offering?
So first question, why do we buy Instagram? Second question, were we disappointed with our IPO? Future value journalist right here. Why did we buy Instagram? Because Instagram's an amazing service, and we could tell, and we thought that we could help them, and they thought that we could help them. Like, I think it's easy, anybody would want to buy Instagram if it had anything to do with their line of business. Like, maybe a better question is ask Kevin, you know, why did Instagram want Facebook to buy them? And I think they did because they felt like they could grow faster and be more successful with what Facebook brings to the table. The services are not very competitive. Most of the people who use Instagram also use Facebook and vice versa, and most of the people who post photos to Instagram also share those photos on Facebook. So it's not like they compete. If anything, they feed off each other. And I think what's really fascinating to us about Instagram is not like the photos functionality. We did build that functionality ourselves. but the graph that they've assembled. Because the user graph on Instagram is very different. Your connections on Instagram are pretty different from your connections on Facebook. There's overlap, but it's distinct. And what Instagram has going, I think, is more of an interest graph or a topic graph. Like, it tells you more about like what you're interested in, not just who you know. So I think that's really fascinating for us. The IPO where we just went, you know what, we mostly spent, like the posters that were plastered over campus before the IPO were, what was it? Stay focused and keep shipping. The prayer that most employees had for the IPO was that it would not distract us from our mission. And I think that when you're a mission-led company, you were mostly focused, like us, like you were mostly focused on accomplishing that mission and connecting the world. And the IPO is like, it was a big event, don't get me wrong, it was a huge party. We actually threw an overnight hackathon the night before, and we all stayed up all night, so we'd be there at 6 a.m. the next day, which is about the only time a software engineer ever sees 6 a.m. is when they stayed up for it. So it was like a big event, but I think we all mostly just wanted to like stay focused on business and do our stuff. And you know, Facebook has been through so many hype cycles in its existence. Like, we're never as good as they say we are, and we're never as bad as they say we are. And I think that we were all like kind of braced for that. So even before you added public markets into the picture. Here on the end.
Do you fear that Facebook will become next MySpace?
Do I fear that Facebook will become the next MySpace? No, definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, I don't. MySpace, you know, there's like a kind of there's a mythology that Facebook killed MySpace, and I don't actually think that's true. I think the world has seen very confidently that it's not like there's only room for one winner in social networking. Like, people very happily use Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram. You know, so I think like the rise of Facebook is not what destroyed MySpace. What destroyed MySpace was that they were bought by a larger company who had really short-term objectives and was short-sighted, and they stopped executing well and they stopped innovating. And you know, I think one of the really comforting things for me as an employee of Facebook is my company can't be bought. The founder of my company has board control. So nobody can take us over and drive us into a ditch. And that's actually a pretty good, that's pretty reassuring, honestly, as an entrepreneur. Next question. I might not have said that to the journalists in the back.
Yeah, like you named invites, is there like so much in it off?
Game invites, we turn them off. No, probably. We've gone through various phases of making those more and less visible. I think you can definitely block an app. I don't know if you can comprehensively block all apps at once. Search the Help Center, honestly. A search engine will find the answer for you, but I think so. I'm kind of addicted to Candy Crush myself. I'm in good company. Andy, do we have any more time?
We have a few more minutes.
All right, a couple more questions. Is that a hand in the back row?
Does Facebook have any concerns about the amount of time people spend like on it as opposed to YouTube?
We have concerns about the amount of time people spend on it. That's a good question. I think that, no. And it's the honest answer. And the reason is because we truly believe that we're building a service to create value for people. And we think that people spending more time on Facebook is evidence that we are actually creating value in their lives. And I think it's tempting, as a parent, like it's tempting to say, hey, there's good time spent and bad time spent. And like, I want my kids spending time doing things that enrich them and not things that are mind-numbing. But I think like as a platform vendor, you actually have to be agnostic to that. Like you can start thinking like a parent when you're building software, but it's always a bad idea. You can sort of think like, I worked on newsfeed for a long time, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how we order the newsfeed and how we rank it, and should we have an editorial opinion? Like, should we decide that newsfeed stories rank higher than funny cat videos? And I think we eventually sort of convinced ourselves that that way lies censorship and sort of tyranny, right? Like that it's actually, we're building a service for other people and we're not their parent. We need terms of service that protect users from hate speech and other things that are illegal. But the instant we sort of start tiptoeing into just preferring some kinds of content or some kinds of activities over others, we're taking choice away from users. And we're like trying to act in a parental way, which is ultimately like, I think actually very, very dangerous and lends itself to technology companies abusing the power that they have of providing a service. So I want to say like, we're providing a service to you, and if you're spending time on it, then we conclude that we've done well by you, that we're doing something good for you. And if you spend less time on it, we probably screwed up somehow, and we're doing something bad. You know, So I think we're truly just building that, and what you do with it is in your control. And the content you find on it is actually in Facebook also in your control.
You have a question way back here.
Yes. Yes, you behind
Okay.
Go.
How do you like retain users? Like, how do you keep Facebook like hip? I guess.
How do we retain users? How do we keep Facebook?
Like hip. How do you make it like the most popular
I don't know
thing?
if we do keep it hip, to be honest. I think I think for something to be hip implies that, or trendy implies that it's short-lived. Like you can't be fashionable every year for 50 years, unless you're a little black dress maybe. So I think that it's probably Facebook's fate not to be hip in the long run. Hopefully, it's our fate to be something very humble and utilitarian, which is just plumbing, something you use every day without thinking about it, something that you know you need in your life, and that you can count on to be there and that you trust. And so I think we're going for trustworthy, not hip these days. And how do we become trustworthy is, another good and hard problem that we're working with. Here. Do I myself spend a lot of time on Facebook? Yes, absolutely. So it turns out that Facebook employees all communicate with each other about work on Facebook. So like, instead of emailing each other, I can Facebook message each other. All these design discussions, like the mocks and pictures would be posted in Facebook groups. So like, I basically spend every minute of my workday on Facebook, and it's like, actually when I go home, it's harder to use Facebook for my social life, because if I turn on Facebook, I will see updates about my cousins or my kids or my friends, but I'm also going to see work updates, so it's kind of like logging into my work email. So that's like, I don't know, mixed bag. Here and there.
Is the initial chat friends list really people who stalk you the most?
No, is the initial chat friends list people who stalk you the most. Your stalking of other people on Facebook is not revealed to any other user in any way. There is no way to reverse engineer it or back into it. None whatsoever. Your privacy is not leaked. What we do is something, if you stalk other people, that will signal to us that you're interested in them, and we will show you more of them. But the reverse isn't true. All right? So who you stalk goes into that algorithm. Who stalks you does not. Your privacy is actually extremely important to us. Rumors to the contrary. Yes?
Why did you decide to add feature where you want to
Why did we decide to add a feature that lets you see when someone saw your message? Because we want people to use Facebook messages instead of texting. Right? Like we want you we think Facebook messages can be better than texting. And one of the ways that you know that you're actually in a conversation with someone is like seeing if they're there on the other end. So it's pretty good. Like I realize that if you want to pretend you didn't see them, it's sort of, well then don't use Facebook messaging for that conversation. I mean, send an email. But it's for conversation. We want the chat use case. Yes. Is it true that CIA can see your messages? No, it's an important question actually. Facebook does nothing to give the CIA access to your information, or I do not know of it, and I think that I would. So whether the CIA is snooping on, but the internet is an open protocol, right? Your message goes over a bunch of wires and data connections that physically could be snooped.